This was such an incredible conversation. I absolutely adore Amy Burk. You have got to go over to Instagram and follow her. She goes by Chronicled Fight, and what she is doing is chronicling her fight with chronic illness or her healing journey, really. She is in a season of healing and is so inspirational. So I'm really excited to bring you this episode. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed talking to Amy. Amy Burk, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on and talk to you about your health journey.
Thank you very much.
So I was really excited to find you on Instagram. I don't even know how. It's one of those things where you're bumping around and it was such a breath of fresh air to see your journey and how kind you are and all of the things that you've done. So I thought we have to have Amy on the show so that because you're chronicling, you're saying like, this is my fight from my chronic illness and helping other people. And it's very inspiring. So I thought I thought we would start with a little bit of your story, kind of where you've been and how bad it got, and then work our way to where you are now.
Okay, sounds good. So thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I love sharing my story. It feels very redemptive of what felt like lost years. So I would say knowing what I know now and looking back, I can see traces and evidence of a very dysregulated nervous system through childhood. Some of my earliest memories are fear. So I definitely struggled a lot with fear and anxiety as a very young child. And then coming up through adolescence, I started experiencing depression and OCD, which none of this was diagnosed until many years later into adulthood. But I started struggling with OCD and depression in adolescence. And then I've always just been a very highly sensitive child, highly sensitive person, carried that with me into adulthood and several little T traumas stacking up.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately several big T traumas. And when I was 21, I was married and pregnant and in really bad shape, struggling very much with my mental health, with my physical health. I had hyperemesis gravidarum during pregnancy, which is just very, very severe morning sickness. For those of you who don't know, it is all day, every day. I was hospitalized. I almost died. I almost lost my daughter. It was very traumatic. And then about halfway through my pregnancy, we found out that our daughter had some very severe heart defects, had a 20% chance to live, and that it was a terminal diagnosis. And the oldest survivor was only 5 years old at the time. And once I delivered her, I just never recovered from the practically 9 months of bed rest, the hospital stays, doctors, the surgeries for me, the surgeries for her, and out of the hospital. Isolation kicked in. We weren't able to be around family or friends. We just had to kind of isolate down into our little house because she was so fragile.
Yeah.
And then I started getting very fragile. And that's when the diagnoses started kicking in. I started going to the doctor. I started seeing a therapist about 6 months after she was born for the first time ever to get any kind of mental health help.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started seeing the doctor when she was probably about 1 or 2. And I started getting diagnosed with things. My first diagnosis was depression and anxiety. And then it was the fibromyalgia. And then the list started growing. Ultimately, I ended up getting over 25 different diagnoses over the span of the next decade as I continued to spiral. And I ended up almost completely bed and wheelchair bound and severely, severely depressed. Treatment after treatment, medication after medication, natural doctors, regular medical doctors. You've heard the story. We all have a similar story in this world. And that's kind of the background of how I ended up where I was. And I was there for several years.
Yeah. And as a little person, so when you were little and you said you had a lot of fear, can you trace that to anything? Or you think that was just you being really sensitive? Or did you have I mean, we all had trauma. I mean, we all had a birth. We were born there's always trauma, but I didn't know if there were significant things that you could trace it back to, or you just feel like you've kind of always had that fragile nervous system.
I feel like it's always been very fragile. I feel like I was kind of born predisposed to struggle, and I just didn't have the support I needed and the education in my family that was needed to kind of be the tools that I needed to succeed. I also think that generational trauma is real. And that was pretty significant in my line on both my mom and dad's side. So I really do believe that that plays a role. And there was just not a lot of mental health or emotional regulation within my circle.
Right.
And I think that could have played a role in things.
Right. And are you still married to the same person you were married to at 21?
Yes.
Yes. So you guys have been through a lot.
Yes.
In that time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And is he strong, healthy person, like trying to understand what's wrong with you? It sounds like he was supportive because you stayed, but
Right.
Yes,
no, it's been a challenge. Our marriage, we started so young and both from fairly unhealthy backgrounds in therapy for a long time. Big advocate for therapy. I don't think it's all you need, but I do think it's vastly important. That education piece. What I love most about my husband is his willingness to learn, and he is always doing the best that he can with the information that he has. And so in the early days, that was a good heart, good intentions, poorly executed for what I needed, as it was in my nucleus family. I mean, my parents love me dearly. I still love my parents. I am close to my parents, but unfortunately, they didn't have the tools to help me. And neither did my husband, but neither did I. So I don't hold them accountable for those things.
Neither did most of the doctors that you saw and
none of them. I found my answers on Instagram.
Oh my gosh.
That's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about sharing my story on Instagram.
Yes. I can see that. Okay, so let's get to where you are now. Okay. And you should definitely send me some pictures, because I think people need to see. Well, they can come follow you on Instagram and see themselves, but just the difference, because you look so vibrant and healthy. Your eyes are clear. I mean, we all have bad days, but where are you now?
Yes. So, okay, I am doing wonderful. I really am. I am healing. I feel like I'm glowing inside. I feel alive. So I started really healing in December of 2021.
Okay.
And we can talk more about that later, but where I'm at now, I would say I'm probably about 40% to like where I want to be at 100%. Of where I want to be. And I would say like I used to live at like 2%. Like I literally spent all day every day in bed, depressed, crying, some days not able to brush my hair, not able to feed myself. Sometimes I couldn't even walk to the bathroom. I'd have to be carried. Some days I couldn't even speak. And so now I haven't spent a day in bed in many, many, many months. I am able to get dressed and fix my hair and shower and walk up and down my stairs. And sometimes I can cook or bake, and I can eat more foods, and I can go outside for walks, and I can go to the beach. And I still have limitations. I still have hard times. I'm not 100% symptom free, but my life is radically improved, and it's amazing.
Right. I'm so happy for you. And your daughter, tell me about your daughter.
Yes. So she's 12. She just finished 7th grade yesterday.
Wow.
She's had 10 heart surgeries.
Okay. Yeah.
She is now in the first generation of survivors. Her condition is considered a terminal illness. We don't know what her future looks like. In her last surgery, we did get some news that other organs are starting the process that we knew they would start, which is declining. At some point, we will probably be looking at a transplant. But right now, we're trying to manage with a new medication to try to help her. And we really live life one day at a time. And that grief and that heaviness is really, I didn't know how to live with that. And that was just too much for me to bear. as a mom. And every day it just was like, is this it? Is this the last day? And that is still a heavy grief to bear. It will never be an easy thing to carry. But what it has given us as a family is the gift of the present moment. And in order to heal, you really have to stay in the present. You can't be all the time in your past pain or hurts, and you can't be in the future fear of worst nightmare coming true. Right now, I have my daughter and my husband, and we are happy and we are healthy and we are thriving. And I work really hard to stay in the present moment. And I think that with that grief has come a gift of perspective, of never taking a day for granted, never taking a moment for granted. And it has enriched our lives as much or more as it has hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could cry for days knowing that.
You and me both.
Yeah. I mean, just as mother to mother, like my heart goes out to you and your whole family and your sweet daughter, and amazing that she's 12. And, but I just can't even imagine how you were. I don't know how you were doing it, because if you couldn't even get out of bed, I mean, of course, so you've got all of this on top of, you know, the chronic illness and all the different diagnoses that you have or had. And yeah, and you're still carrying that burden. And yet I would imagine that you're like, I have to get up because I have to do things for my daughter.
Yeah. I can't even express the amount of guilt and shame and anger and grief that I was missing her life. Day after day, I would just be so sad that I couldn't get up and play with her, or that I couldn't even be in the same room with her because I was so overstimulated, or I had a terrible migraine, or I felt like I was going to cry all day, and I didn't want her to see me that way. And I just remember feeling like, this isn't fair. Like, I'm missing it.
Well, really, Amy, it doesn't seem fair to me.
No.
And I haven't been through what you've been through, but I know that feeling of like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, what are we doing here? If this is it, like if everything has some purpose, if I don't know how you make sense of this, but I would be like, I don't think I can do this. Like, we need to renegotiate, God. I'm like, I know maybe I agreed to this, but now I changed my mind. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
Yes, God and I had many very long, deep conversations about what is your purpose in this suffering.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, there were many times when I was so, so depressed. And I hope this is okay to talk about, but there was like days where I was just crying, and then I would just pray, God, like, please stop my heart.
Yeah.
I can't do this. This is too much for me to bear. And I think that this is like the symptoms and the shutdown. I believe it was my brain's way of trying to protect me from the pain of the reality of losing my daughter.
Right.
Like, oh, your daughter is dying. You're going to have to live a life without her. And I think my brain was like, I cannot. That is impossible. That kind of pain is too much to bear. And I think it shut me down.
Yeah.
And I think there was a subconscious, it was never a conscious choice to be sick, ever. I was trying hard to get well and beating myself up that I couldn't. But I think there was part of me that knew that I didn't want to survive if she didn't.
Right. Right. Of course. Yeah.
And I think that by being ill, again, not a choice, but by my body being ill, it kept me in a state where she's not healthy, I'm not healthy. She goes, I go. And ironically, in its effort to keep me well, it was keeping me from living with what I had, for what I had. And honestly, the bravest thing I've ever done is allow myself to heal, knowing that it could mean I could survive the worst imaginable pain.
Right. Right.
And I
Mhm.
had to choose
Mhm.
to have now,
Mhm.
knowing I might have more pain later, but it's worth it.
Mhm. To have now.
It's worth it to have a day with her. She's magic.
Yeah, sure she is.
And so, I told God so many times, my life is yours.
Yeah.
I don't want this life. But if you leave me here and you ask me to walk this path, I have faith that there's a purpose and that you can use it. And that's why these days feel so redemptive,
Right.
because they feel like they matter. I get to share it with other women who are hurting, who are sad, who feel lost, who feel hopeless.
Mhm.
And I get to say, don't give up,
Right.
because the redemptive days are so sweet. It doesn't take away the pain that you walked through, but it doesn't sting the way I thought it would to remember those days, because now feels so good and I'm just focused on now.
Right. Yeah. Do you remember a turning point? Was there a moment, a day, a prayer? You found you found your healing on Instagram of all places, but was that the day, or was there something before that?
So I had been doing some research. I had gotten really, really dark again, depression wise. And I had tried literally dozens and dozens. I had seen probably close to 100 practitioners, and I'm not exaggerating. I went to 4 different states in the US seeking help. I was at the Mayo Clinic for over 2 months one time. Like, I went everywhere and did everything.
Mhm.
And I hadn't gotten any treatments in quite a while. And I was really losing hope. And I was like, there is nothing else for me. And I remember I had a family doctor appointment, and I went in and explained everything to him. Finding a new doctor is always a challenge.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I really want you to go see this neurologist. And I was like, oh, I've seen so many neurologists. I have my diagnoses. Like, there's no getting better. It is what it is. And he said, well, I'd really just like you to go. All right, I'll go. And it was an MS specialist. And I had a lot of MS symptoms, but he looked at me and he was just kind of like, it was one of those kind of routine visits where they're kind of in and out, and you know that it's not going to go anywhere. And he was fixing to leave the room, and he told me, I looked healthy and good, and my labs are always, pretty good, and my tests are always pretty good, and yet I'm not functioning. I can't walk, I can't talk sometimes. And he paused, and he kind of turned back around, and he sat down, and he started asking me some questions, and I just burst into tears. I was so sad and helpless and hopeless and depressed. And he started asking me about my life and my traumas and my experiences. And as I shared with him, he said, I think you have what we call functional neurological disorder, which I had already kind of self diagnosed at one point on the internet,
Yeah.
finding that. But he said, which means like structurally, your brain is like fine, but it's just functionally, it's not functioning healthy at all.
Mhm.
And he said, we call it, in my field, we call it the disease of the soul. And it's whenever you've gone through so much trauma that your brain cannot hold it, cannot function, and it shuts down. And he said, it is by far the hardest neurological disorder to treat. And I realized in that moment I had done all the testing I needed to do. Something clicked. I was done. I was done with the rheumatologist, the neurologist, and the cardiologist, and all of the things. I had seen them all. I had had all the tests that I needed, because I kept knowing I needed more because I didn't have the answers.
Mhm.
Something inside of me was like, it's the pain. It's just too much for me to bear.
Mhm.
And so something clicked that day. And that's when I found brain rewiring. I went home and I cried and cried and cried. And I just felt like a release, like a freedom to
Mm.
explore brain rewiring. And that's when I found that and decided to go down that route. And I found out about limbic system and nervous system. It's just been life-changing.
Yeah. So did you do a specific program or what? Yeah, where did you start with your nervous system with rewiring or limbic system?
Yes. So I found on Instagram a girl, her name is Sarah Jackson, and her handle is at Sarah Jackson Coaching. Fantastic follow. She had done a program called Dynamic Neural Retraining System, DNRS.
Mhm.
And so I decided to give that a try. And I did that for a full year every day.
Wow.
And I added in somatic practices. And so I started that NRS in December of 2021. And then I
Mhm.
started somatic practices in April of 2022.
Okay. Was your therapist before, did any of your therapists ever talk to you about any of that or somatic experiencing or doing some other limbic retraining, any of that?
No,
Okay.
no, none of that. I had tried some things like EMDR
Yep.
and, of course, lots of other types of therapy. I had done ERP for OCD and some other things. And I had had some like help from those things,
Right.
but never any like resolve. And EMDR was just, it shut my system down so fast. I could
Did
not
it?
tolerate EMDR.
Wow. That's good to know. Yeah, because some people can't even get near, like the clickers or
Yeah.
the bilateral stimulation is just too upsetting for them.
Hmm.
So that's good for people to know. When it works beautifully for people. It can be a really helpful tool. So that's why I think it's so important to never stop looking for the right tools. And
Yes.
the nervous system, like it always seems to come back to supporting the nervous system. So it sounds like that was just the key for you to to unlock what you needed. But I just think it's so impressive that this neurologist said it's really, this is a problem of the soul. And
Hmm.
one of the hardest, it makes so much sense that your brain is just like cannot handle it. And so you start having all these problems, even though functioning, so all your blood tests are going to be good. Everything is going to structurally look good. So this is, we find that a lot in trauma, but I just think your case is so unique and yet I'm sure so many people can relate that I just think it's so important for that you're sharing because I feel like more and more people need to understand this piece of what could be going on for them.
Hmm. Yes. And I feel like it's a it's a delicate topic because I never want it to come across as I'm saying you're choosing to be sick or you're causing your illness. Like this is a completely involuntary condition,
Right.
and it is only to be met with compassion and love and validation. I mean, if you are in that much pain that your brain has to shut off
Yeah.
and cause you to have to live a life in bed and misery 24/7, and that's relief
Yeah.
from that kind of pain, then no, I just have a heart full of love and compassion. I always just tell people, I just want to give you the biggest hug because
Mhm.
I don't know what kind of pain led you to the position that you're in, but I'm just really sorry that you walked through it.
Yes. Yeah, that's where I could cry for days too, just the amount of pain that people have endured. But it would just, even when people, if your stress bucket is full, it's full. So it's
Yes.
not like you can decide which, if it's, your nervous system is going to let you know that you've got a problem, but your body's going to do what it needs to do to keep you alive. It's always trying to keep you alive. So shutting down is often what it needs to do to keep you alive.
Absolutely. And I I hear people say often things like, "Oh, I'm grateful for everything I went through because of where it led me and et
Mm,
cetera, et cetera." And I have said for many months now, like, I've healed so much, but I'm just not to the place where I can say I'm grateful for what I went through. I don't know that I'll ever say I'm grateful for what I went through. And then recently I've been thinking and feeling like this gratitude for my body and brain's wisdom
Yeah.
to do what it had to do. I would have never gotten out of the toxic circle that I was in.
Mhm.
I would have never been able to get the support that I needed in my marriage.
Mhm.
I would have never been able to shift my relationship with God.
Mhm.
So much has shifted only because all of the things that I had tried to throw at my health to make myself well on my own
Mhm.
failed.
Right.
And it drove me to move across the country.
Mhm.
It drove me to find a new circle, to find new doctors, to find a new therapist, to find new friends. And ultimately, I found a whole new life. But if I had slowly started to kind of get better, what would have happened is my bucket would have slowly gotten a little bit
A bit
emptier and
better.
then full again, and then a little bit emptier and then a little bit full. Because what I think people don't understand is trauma is not exactly like what has happened to you. It is how your mind body has processed what has happened to you.
Right. That's exactly right. Yes. And so, yeah, you're right. You would have gotten, I love that, the analogy of like the bucket would have gotten a little bit better and then back up. You would have just been doing the seesaw the whole time. It's amazing that. So where did you grow up that you ended up going across the country?
I grew up in Oklahoma in a really small town outside of Oklahoma City in the country at the end of a dirt road out on some acreage. And now I'm halfway across the country on the coast of California.
Mhm.
I needed sunshine. I needed fresh air. I needed a fresh start. I needed a new place
Yeah. Mhm.
and I needed stable weather.
So, yeah, like I love that you're changing everything. And for me, what really moved the needle in my life, and I was doing all the things, and really nutrition made a big difference for me. Therapy was good, but the getting outside, the sun, my
Mhm.
relationship with the sun has become really important in my healing. So I really rule my life and my day by the sun and never miss a sunrise no matter where I am. And so, and if it's gross outside, that doesn't matter because the sun is still rising. You just maybe can't see it. And so it's been it's a metaphor for me, but it's also that's absolutely something that's important. So you mentioning like I needed sunshine, I needed outdoors, I needed fresh air, I needed a fresh start. You needed a whole new group of people too, which how has that been? Because it's sometimes challenging to find your people when you move.
Yes, no, it has been a challenge. We actually moved at the end of 2017. So we
Yeah.
had all of 2018, we made some friends. And then all of 2019, my daughter ended up getting really, really sick and was in and out of the hospital and was struggling quite a bit. And then 2020, the world shut down.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we have been pretty isolated since then, just because of my, at the time, especially fragility and my daughter's fragility. It
Yeah.
was bad. My anxiety took over and I didn't want to leave the house. And it was really hard for the last few years. But we've actually just started venturing back out. She started a dance class. So we're going to try again. It does feel a little bit like starting over.
Yeah.
We tried a new church on Sunday. She's in her little dance class. She's been in there for a few weeks. And so I feel like we're kind of starting over again, but we did it before. I know we can do it again. But I'm a more cautious person making friends because I've seen unhealthy and I know what I don't want.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm like, I don't need an abundance. I just need
No,
quality.
I 100% agree with that. We moved to Florida in 2021. So
Okay.
I'm sort of in the same boat, finding my people. And, when you know exactly what you want, you'd think it would be a lot easier, but
Mhm.
it's more like I know exactly what I don't want. So
Right.
yeah, but I love that you're in an area where you get a lot of sunshine. Do you find that that's helpful for you too?
Very much, very much. So I've learned a lot since you found me on Instagram. I've listened to some of your podcasts and I've been learning a lot from you because I do feel like for me, like the limbic system and the nervous system was like key. Like
Yeah.
I've done all the healthy eating and I got nowhere. I've done the exercise, I got nowhere. All these people talking about, oh, this works. But now that I have had this underlayer, I do think I could see benefit from getting up to see the sunrise or grounding or eating nutritious foods, because now those things have the capacity to help take loads off, whereas before it was just like throwing a raindrop at a wildfire and it did nothing for me.
Yes.
But once they brought the helicopters in, with those big buckets of water and brought things down, well, now it matters. Now it works. It helps. And so I'm excited to kind of continue as I continue healing. Call this my healing season. Continue to heal in this season, adding in some of those things, like the grounding and the sun, the circadian rhythms, and everything that you've been talking about. I'm learning from you.
That I never shut up about. Yeah. I mean, I hope it's helpful because I also think it could be really helpful for your daughter. I'm guessing
Yes.
that you've taught her a lot of things too about her nervous system. So that's got to be amazing.
Well, I hope so. I feel like so many times, like, I guess we don't know if we're doing it right until it's too late in parenting. But one of the things is that I feel like a lot of times parents have this concept when they're raising children as we have to prepare them for the real world
Mhm.
by like toughing them up or making it real life circumstances. And like my perspective is different. I understand raising a daughter with a terminal illness. Like I do know that we're focused more on quality of time versus, I mean, versus like quantity. Do you know what I mean? Like we want it to be good. It doesn't have to be as long. But I think that for me, my goal with her is to make our home a secure attachment container of safety with a healthy nervous system. And I can't help but believe that that is the best way I can actually prepare her to go out to the real world, to know that she has this secure attachment in mom and dad and this container of safety in our home and this nervous system tools. And like, I love listening to her. She's 12 and she knows, hey, I'm feeling angry. There's something underneath this. And she'll go to her room and she'll come out and she'll be like, hey, mom, I think I was actually feeling sad, lonely, or disappointed. And this is why. And I think it came out as anger. And I'm sorry about that. And I'm like, yeah, let's talk about that. Let's feel our feelings. Like we don't have to shove anger aside. Let's feel it. Let's let it move through. And then let's figure out what's underneath so that we can tend to what really matters. And I just think that creating that container of safety and that secure attachment really is the best way we can help the future generations to go out into the world and be successful. I just think it's such an honor to be a mom and get the opportunity to teach her what I'm learning in my 30s when she's 12. That's right. So cool. Even if she doesn't know it, even if she gets annoyed sometimes, Mom, I know.
Right. Yeah. Well, they're supposed to do that. But recently I was thinking the same. Really, my only goal is to have safety. Like keep making me so that coming to me is safe and our home as safe as I can make it in the constraints that you have, right? Yeah. But psychologically, emotionally, mentally, like that is what I think is the most important. And giving kids tools to help regulate their nervous system, I really don't think there's anything that's better than that. And letting whatever feeling be. So I just recently saw somebody posted something about meditation and how mindfulness and meditation, everybody wants to push that on kids. Not that it's not helpful, but we're not trying to bypass anger and sadness and other things that come up by, you don't want these tools to then say, so you can calm down if you're not calm. Like we're not always supposed to be calmed down when something is really not right. So I think that's important to keep in place too, is just to allow kids to be who they are. And I mean, yeah, it's an honor and it is definitely the hardest thing that I have done in my life is try to parent well and be a place of safety for my kids. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, I think of the polyvagal theory,
mm-hmm.
and it's like, I'm learning that like, we don't always stay at the top of the ladder in that rest and digest. It's very good and healthy and normal for us to bounce through these fight or flight or freeze or shut down modes. But when you have a dysregulated and unhealthy nervous system, you get stuck down here.
Yeah.
And I lived my life down here, maybe my whole life, most of all of my adult life, most of my life. And so getting to have that like empowerment of like, oh, I know what this feels like and I can get there. And so I will bounce down in here really easily, being a highly sensitive person. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I heard a loud noise. Woof. But I used to stay there. And now I get to go back up to the ladder, back up to the top of the ladder. And so teaching our kids about like that emotional regulation and like it's normal and healthy and good as long as you can just get back up there. It's exciting. I get excited. I could just talk for hours about it. It's just incredible.
It is really exciting. I talked about it this week. It really does. I remember people saying it's like riding a wave. And so riding the waves of the emotions or riding the waves of up and down in your, the polyvagal nerve, and you're going through these different, and it really does truly feel like I can ride in a sturdy way now. Whereas before I feel like I was like hanging on maybe to the board and I was flopping around and scared. I was scared that I could do it. I was scared that I wouldn't be able to stay in a peaceful rest and digest state. I was always had this fear. And so now I know I can ride, and I can ride at the bottom. I could even ride flop. I mean, I know I won't stay there. And in 2 or 3 minutes on a drive, I can go through a whole range of emotion and range of nervous system responses. It's quite amazing, actually.
It is. That's so relatable. I remember telling my husband, I said, I used to feel like I was dropped in the middle of the ocean and there were storms all around me. I had no idea which way land was. I felt like I was being tossed and beaten and drowning, scorched, hungry, whatever. And now I feel like I'm on a ship and I'm the captain of the ship and I'm a skilled sailor. There are still storms that come up. There are still hardships. There's, the boat might get a leak or something might break, but I feel like I have the capacity to like tend to that and continue on my journey. It's like, it's just vastly different. It's just a vastly different experience once you have like the knowledge and it clicks.
Yeah. I love that analogy, but it's not just the knowledge. I mean, you practice every single day.
Every single day. Yeah.
Like this is not a couple times and it didn't work. I didn't do it, or, whatever. Right. So for you, was there a time that you weren't even sure if it was working, but you just kept doing it? Like you committed to do it daily. And so you just did?
Yes. I committed to a year everyday practice, regardless of the outcome. I knew I would be sick for the next year anyway. I had no other prospects. And I'm a very determined person. My husband says it's stubborn, but we'll just call it determined. And once I set my mind to something, I'm like, I'm going to do this. Now, that hyper vigilance, like striving, is actually a pretty common trait in people with chronic illness. And it's not always a good thing. So I'm not saying that's great, but that is what got me through that first year in all transparency. And I had a lot of really awful times and days. And I was like, this is ridiculous. This is not going to work. This is insane. I don't know why people think this works, but I'm just going to do it to prove that it's not going to work. Joke's on me, but that's okay. I can lose this one. I don't mind. But every day since that first year, I've still continued to practice, but now it's not out of striving. It's not out of to prove anything or to get well. It's just because I matter. And it's an invitation to love myself and to live a different life. And so now when I practice, it's just out of abundance for a fuller and richer life.
Experience.
So
yeah, amazing. How long is your practice? I mean, so if somebody's like, okay, how many minutes do I have to do this?
So consistency is key, but DNRS, one of the things about it, it's very rigid. I'm not that rigid with it, but they say an hour a day. is the golden standard. I didn't practice an hour a day. Some days I did, but it wasn't every single day. I tell people show up with your personal best every day. And that varies from day to day because your capacity will vary from day to day. And if you push yourself past your capacity to hit an hour or whatever it is, then you are not being as successful because you're showing your body that you're still not a safe person to listen to it. It's trying to tell us something with symptoms. And so we have to listen and we have to show it. We can tell it that it's safe, but we have to show it as well. Show and tell. They have to go together. And so now it just varies from day to day. And it did then too, but I did work hard to do, 40 minutes to 60 minutes a day in that first year was really my goal. And I did that a lot of days, but not every day. But I showed up with my best every day. And now it's just like some days it's 30 minutes, some days it's an hour, some day it's like 10 minutes, but that's the focused practice. Mm-hmm. But it's changed my way of living all throughout the day.
Right. I was everything's changed.
Everything has changed. I mean, if I'm just washing my hands, sometimes I'll stop and I'll just relax my shoulders and smile at myself in the mirror and just be like, I get to live this life and it's different and I'm healing and it's beautiful. And it's like seconds, but it's just something, my perspective, my thoughts shifted.
Amazing. I do think that's amazing. So what else that we didn't cover? What else nourishes your body, mind, soul?
I feel like we've covered so much. I think that again, I do the cognitive work for the limbic system with the DNRS. I do the somatic practices just for my body. I've worked hard to work on my relationship with God because a lot of what I was taught was damaging and hurtful, and I don't feel like accurately reflected who Jesus is. And so I worked hard for that with my spirit and soul, that health to stay connected to him and to nourish my soul in that way. Mm-hmm. Mostly I just stay present, stay in the present moment, look for glimmers, for beauty. I don't ignore the pain. I don't deny it. I just come into my body, create safety. I be a friend to my body. I get to be a friend because now I know how to care for myself well. And I've never had that before. I've never had anybody love me as well as I've been able to love myself now in this season. And something about that love is incredibly healing. Mm-hmm. We need connection. We need love to heal. But I always thought that meant it had to come from other people.
Good point.
And I'm getting to be that person. I'm not always over explaining or needing validation at all times because I get to give that to myself. And I have like this, just a calming, peaceful, like confidence inside that I'm okay. And I know what I need and I have it. And that's what it feels like to be at the top of the ladder.
Right. Right. For sure. Yeah. I always say love is the medicine. I don't know anything. I'm not even really sure technically what I mean by that. I just know in my heart that love is the medicine. So I really appreciate you taking the time. You're such a beautiful soul. So to share it, and I'm so grateful that you keep sharing and you have all these exercises that you show people all the time. So if people are listening and they're like, wait, I don't know what to do, they can come find you. I will make sure that people know how to find you in the show notes so they can come learn for themselves how to nurture themselves in this way. But really, it's about really befriending yourself and being really kind and gentle and loving yourself and nourishing yourself.
And, yes, and being curious.
Yes.
Curious over critical. There was so much critical self-talk that turned to curiosity. Why am I feeling angry? Why am I feeling hurt? Why am I having this big reaction? Just that simple switch will change so much. That's
true. Yeah, to stay curious about it instead of trying to shove it away or get critical about it. Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, Amy, thank you. I loved having you. We'll have to do more. We'll have to do a second one. I'm sure people are going to want to hear more from you. So we'll plan to do that.
Alrighty. Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.